finally, from the Pistons. It's a stress-free win. Before we talk about the game, I do want to go ahead and drop our socials if you guys are unfamiliar. I am Ryan. I'm with the Sports Carnage podcast that Detroit Sports Nation puts out every Thursday. We usually record on Tuesdays and then put it out on the Thursdays that it comes out. So if you haven't yet checked us out at some point in the video, go ahead and click on the link in the description there. Give us a like, share, subscribe, review, whatever. You can find us on Apple Podcast, on Podbean, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of those websites. But now let's talk about why we're all really here. And that is for the Pistons' really just dominant win over the San Antonio Spurs. One thing that I'm super excited about, and I probably shouldn't be because it's a stupid, it's just kind of a stupid little anecdote, but the Pistons not giving up 100 points. They were too shy, essentially. They kept them to under 100 points, which I know there's a lot of garbage time in a game that you win by 34 points, but it's always cool to keep a team under that threshold, especially in today's NBA. And the Spurs are nothing to write home about for the first time in, 30 years probably. But it's, regardless of who you do it against, it is impressive. What was also impressive in this game is, of course, the contributions that you did, the early contributions that you got from the young guys. Namely, Christian Wood is the guy that you have to be talking about after this game. 28 points, 10 boards, 11 of 14 shooting. Made all of his shots from the free throw line, even though he only shot 4 of them, and he hit a couple threes. He played 22 minutes as opposed to Thon Maker, who's kind of been his competition for playing time, only getting 5 minutes, which is something that Pistons fans love to see because Thon Maker has been really bad this year, and he's just kind of always been a negative whenever he's gotten on the court. And Christian Wood, he certainly had some bad games and he's made just some, kind of young player mistakes, but he's definitely a guy that you see promise with as far as the organization goes. And if they do decide either this year or next year that they kind of want to blow it up and move forward towards the future, Christian Wood is certainly a guy that can end up making his case to stay on the team and be one of those pieces that you do build around. Who else? You got Sekou Doumbouya. I wish he would have played a little bit more, given that the game was pretty much in hand. But he came in, he got his first NBA points, 4 points in the last 3 minutes of the game. Other kind of standout guys. It was really a collective effort. Another cool note from this game is that every single player that the Pistons roster ended up playing. So they had guys that don't usually, of course, get in. They were able to see the court today because it was such a big blowout. But from the starters, the biggest contributions they got were from Luke Kennard and Andre Drummond, which is kind of, the formula for the Pistons this year, which hasn't resulted in a lot of success, although that's not their fault. But Luke was able to give them 20 points on 8 of 12, 4 of 6 from 3, and then Dre was able to he only scored 9 points, but he was able to give them 16 boards, which of course, like it does every single game with the Pistons, ended up leading them. And then some other contributions from the bench is you had 4 guys off the bench give the Pistons over 10 points. You had Christian Wood obviously give you the 28, but Markieff Morris threw in 10 points of his own, so did Derrick Rose, as well as Svi Mykhailiuk, who scored 13 points and went 5 of 6 from the field. And really, it was just a collective game from the Pistons. And again, the Spurs are a bad team. They're not the worst team that the Pistons have played, but this is by far the best game of the season that the Pistons have been able to put together. And it's, a welcome, really just kind of a welcome sign from what the Pistons had been doing, losing, I think it was 8 out of 10 coming into this game, or something ridiculous like that. So to be able to put together a game like this and get back on the get back on the winning side of a basketball game is something that you really love to see. And for the fans, it's kind of cool because it got it ended at 7:15ish. So that means that you were able to do whatever else you had to do on Sunday night and then enjoy the win if you were able to. But from this game, again, Christian Wood, the biggest just kind of the biggest note. 28 points, of course, a career high for him. And then against Sekou Doumbouya, got his first NBA points, even though he only played in garbage time after getting recalled from Grand Rapids. But that's the only thing I would like to see more is more of Sekou, just because you got to you really just want to see what you get, and you really want to see what you have in him. And though Dwayne Casey and the organization are going to bring him along a little bit slower, you're just kind of eager to see the new toy that you have to play with. Another note for any Pistons fans that have kind of been paying attention to this, there's been a lot of, I won't even call them rumors because it's not rumors, it's just a lot of rumblings and kind of a lot of talk around the fan base that DeMar DeRozan is somebody that the Pistons could be interested in trading for. And DeRozan, obviously, it plays for the Spurs. So he came out tonight, had 20 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and then hit a three-pointer as well. So if that's something that you're kind of looking at, if DeRozan is somebody who does interest you on the trade market, then I'm sure you're paying a little bit closer attention to really just what he was doing today. And Tim Markanovic, one of them, he says, it's the Spurs, relax. Again, of course, the Spurs aren't a very good team, but tonight it's not about who they beat. It's really just the fact that they were able to win, and that they were able to look so good doing it, because they have lost 2 teams worse. They have lost 2 teams that are worse than the Spurs. They've lost to the Hornets 3 times already. They lost to the Bulls a couple times. So it's not, though the Spurs aren't a good team, they're certainly not the worst team in the NBA. And tonight they also didn't have LaMarcus Aldridge, but I mean the Pistons have been playing shorthanded without a guy here or there all year. Obviously they don't have Reggie Jackson, they didn't have Blake for a big stretch, and they also didn't have Derrick Rose for a couple games. So you can play the injury card if you want for the Spurs angle, but then that ignores all the games that the Pistons lost when they weren't at full strength. Jim says we need to put a winning streak together. Absolutely, we do need to put a winning streak together, and you have to win 1 before you can win 2, 3, and 4. And they have a good chance at a win next game out. They do go to Cleveland, but the Cavaliers are a team that really aren't any good. There are a couple teams that are doing worse than the Pistons, and Cleveland is one of those teams. So Cleveland sits at 5-14, while the Pistons are at 7-13, following today's win. But the Pistons are also only 1-9 on the road, and the Cavaliers aren't really good at home. They're 3-7, but that's 20 percentage points better than whatever it is that the Pistons do. So there is definitely an opportunity there for them to string some games together and string some wins together to hopefully climb back up in the Eastern Conference standings. And then after that, they have Milwaukee at home, probably lost. They play Indiana. They play Indiana at home, go to New Orleans, and then they have Dallas and Houston. So yeah, the schedule outside of that Cleveland game, it gets a little bit tougher, just for the Pistons moving forward. And then they get, I was really just kind of a mixed bag, because then they do get Washington, who's a bad team, but then they have to play Toronto and then Boston. And then Chicago again, who's a bad team, but who's already beaten the Pistons, I think, twice this year. So because the Pistons aren't a good team, you can obviously never count anything as a win. But if you're looking at the schedule, you do see some points there where the Pistons, you think, might be able to pull a couple games off. And hopefully they can get a win against a team like Philly they have coming up, or even against a team like Milwaukee somehow, even though you can give them 100 years, and I don't think they're going to beat I don't think they'll beat the Bucks. At least not this version of the Bucks. And I mean, I know he's a great player, but for whatever reason, Giannis always seems to throw it into overdrive whenever the Pistons play, and those games don't ever particularly seem close. Even last year, even in the playoffs, the Bucks are just kind of one of those teams that end up running the Pistons off the floor for just whatever the reason might be. The NBA, we go to the standings. How does this game affect the standings right now? Pistons at 7-13, so they are still a game behind Orlando for the 8th seed, and that's really that. of course, it's not the highest they can go, but that's kind of the only team in striking distance. Brooklyn, who's the 7th seed right now, is at 10-10, so they're 3 games ahead of the Pistons. And there's a couple teams between the Pistons and the Magic. The Hornets being one of those teams who, again, they've already beaten the Pistons a ton this year, as well as Washington. And then teams like Chicago and Cleveland are right below that. I mean, obviously that'll play out way before. It'll play off way different at the end of the year. Sammy says that the bench played really good tonight. You think they should let D Rose go after Jackson comes back? Maybe trade him for a backup shooting guard? No, they shouldn't let Derrick Rose go. I do think that Derrick Rose, and I mean, he's played the bench a lot. I know they tried starting him for a couple games, which obviously didn't work. But no, you have to keep Derrick Rose on this team because he's only going to be he's going to be really the only the consistent source of offense on the bench. You know, you're going to have times where a guy can come off the bench like tonight, and Christian Wood, who gets 28 points, but you're never ever going to, you know, expect that to be the norm. So I think Derrick Rose should stay a Piston as long as they don't absolutely just bottom out. And then if it gets to that point, but I expect the Pistons to be competing for one of those last 2 playoff spots all year, which in case you'll need Derrick Rose to get over that hump. But say God forbid Blake or Andre get hurt and the Pistons lose 10 games in a row, and it makes more sense to tank and to trade people, then obviously in that situation you let Derrick Rose go. But I wouldn't trade him for a backup shooting guard because the only reason you get backup shooting guard is because you want a bigger source of offense off the bench, which Derrick Rose can already provide you. And they have Derrick Rose and Langston coming off the bench. And those are 2 guys that really all year, so Langston, Derrick Rose, and Markieff Morris are going to be, kind of the 3 mainstays off the bench this year. And then probably when Reggie Jackson gets back, you're going to throw Bruce Brown down as well. Bruce Brown or even a guy like Kennard, where then your 9-man rotation is kind of set. John Mosley, why don't they show the cheerleader anymore? I don't know. I don't know, John. I don't know why they show. Is it the auto motion? But maybe if they start winning, you'll see more of the cheerleaders because more to be excited about. So if you're part of the I want to see cheerleaders team, then tanking is not what you want because then nobody's going to go to the game and the cheerleaders are going to be very, very unenthusiastic as far as their cheerings go. But any really other note from tonight is, and it's kind of a downer, but it doesn't tonight it didn't really matter because the Pistons were up by so much. But Blake Griffin's still not looking exactly like himself. Today he only played 22 minutes, but the Pistons were up so much and Christian Wood was playing so well that you could afford to keep Blake off the bench and just keep him, really just keep him healthier. Tony Snell returned to the starting lineup. He scored 17, or he didn't score 17. He played 17 minutes and ended up scoring 5 points. So those are things just to kind of look forward, moving forward. As far as the Pistons go, they are going to still go as far as Blake takes them. So to see Blake take more time to get right is a little bit concerning, only because you thought the first 9 or 10 games of the year that he missed was so that he could make sure that he was right. Make sure he was right, make sure he was in his basketball shape, and just kind of give him a way to manage his minutes throughout the rest of the season. And now we're 20 games in, so I think he came back on the 11th game or 10th game. So it's basically 10 games with them and 10 games without. And that's not even true because after he came back, he missed a couple games. So he's a guy that you thought maybe would he'd perform a little bit better here now. Wesley says, why are you even talking about trading Derrick Rose? People are never satisfied around here. Well, he asked about trading Derrick Rose to see if we can get a backup shooting guard. But like I said, I wouldn't trade Derrick Rose. And I hope you heard that part. But if not, then I guess you heard it now. Nick Harris, shout out Nick Harris, my man's, says tank. Could tank 4 times in one season. And that will certainly be the case if they're down, or if they just lose a bunch of games before the trade deadline on December 15th is when you can trade the guys that you signed in the offseason. So a guy like Derrick Rose that Wesley mentioned, and then somebody above him mentioned above, Derrick Rose can get traded on the 15th. Markieff Morris, I think Tony Snell they traded for. So Tony Snell is fair game whenever. But who else? Tim Frazier, although I don't know who in the right mind would want Tim Frazier. If you're a general manager that's trading for Tim Frazier, you should probably be fired. Nick Harris says the hat is fire. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Lots of compliments. Even in Chicago, we went to the Nike store and I got a compliment on this hat. And obviously, there's Bulls jerseys hanging everywhere. No Michael Jordan jerseys, yo, which is very confusing to go into the Chicago Nike store where they have Jordan brand stuff and shoes and clothes and things like that. But they didn't have any Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan jerseys. It was Zach LaVine and Lowry Markkanen. And if anybody knows why, if you're on Facebook Live right now and you know why that is, please tell me, because I didn't feel like doing the research myself. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, throw a comment in the comment section below and let me know why. Because it's, again, very confused. I ran into Don Reeds today, CCX at Meyer. He seems to love this team. I don't know who Don Reeds is, but I am very excited that he's excited about the Pistons. Let me see here. Don Reeds. Is he an NBA player? This is Don Reed NBA. Maybe that's who he is. Don Reed is a former American player. Pistons in the 1995 draft. There we go. So now you're teaching me things I didn't even know. How long did he play for the Pistons? Until 2000. Well, I was born in 94, so when Mr. Reed stopped playing for the Pistons, I was 6 years old, which will probably and then he played for again in 02-03. Well, he seems to love this team. Good. Him and Detlef Schrempf, the two biggest Piston fans besides all of us, of course. But that's pretty much what we have for you guys tonight. I know usually when we're on here, it's after a loss, so there's a lot more questions. People are bringing out the pitchforks and kind of just the grenade launchers that they want to throw at the team. They want to throw at Dwayne Casey, Andre Drummond, Blake Griffin, whoever. But after you win by 34 points, you really don't have anything. You really don't have anything negative to say, and that's exciting for me because I'd rather talk about the Pistons being good than talk about them losing every game or losing to the Hornets, losing to the Bulls, losing to other bad teams. So super exciting. The last one before we go, Sammy says 97 won the ticket, was reporting that the signing of D Rose created a conflict between coaches and the front office. I guess one of the front office managers pushed to sign Derrick Rose, and everyone was against it. That seems hard for me to believe, only because the Pistons don't really have much of a front office. They have Ed Stefanski, who isn't even actually a general manager. And fun fact, if you didn't know, the Pistons do not have a general manager. Ed Stefanski is probably the one that would fulfill that role. And his title, last time I checked, was like assistant to the owner, which is basically Tom Gores. Let me see if they give him a real title before we head out. Is American sports executive. That doesn't help me. I'm trying. It doesn't seem like they want to give him Stefanski's name, a senior advisor to the owner. So that's what he is. He's not a general manager. I don't see why Dwayne Casey would hate having Derrick Rose on the team, especially when his backup all of last year was Ish Smith, and then the only other guy that they had was Tim Frazier. And they drafted a guy like Jordan Bone, who he's not as good as Derrick Rose, of course. And so he's not as good as Derrick Rose, but they have a lot of the same skill sets. Athletic point guards who can get to the rim, just not very good at shooting. Some guy named Art was pushing for the signing. Oh, Art or Arn? Because Arn Tellem was Arn. I think Arn Tellem used to be Derrick Rose's agent, and he has something to do with the Pistons now. But he used to be a big-time sports agent. There he is, Arn Tellem, the vice chairman of the Pistons. And I'm pretty sure he used to represent Derrick Rose, which would make a whole lot of sense. Tom Clark says, what's up, Nolan? I don't know anybody named Nolan in here, so we'll keep it rolling. At least I can't see it. Nolan, if you're out there and it's just not popping up on my comments, I apologize. Wesley says you're awesome and I love watching you. That's all the work I'm doing for my burner account right here. Is my fake Facebook is Wesley over there. But I appreciate you guys watching with me. Have a great Sunday. I think the Texans and the Patriots are about to kick off in 30-ish minutes or so. So if you guys are into football, that should be a fun matchup for you. That's definitely what I'm going to be watching. Enjoy some drink if you're old enough. Enjoy some food. Just make sure you guys stay safe. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Well, maybe not tomorrow, but whenever the Pistons play next. Good night.